Hi, everybody. Welcome to Talk Openly. I'm Jack, and this is my lovely and excellent friend, Daniel. Hey, Daniel.
Hello. Hi, Jack. Hi, everybody out there in Talk Openly land.
It's so great to be here. We were off last week, and it feels like, I don't know, millennia to me since we've done a show. So it's really great to be back.
Feels like forever.
It really does. Yeah. What were you up to last week, Daniel?
My dad, who I haven't seen in a few years, came to visit and stayed with me. He and his wife and her two kids, who I'd never met.
Wow.
So that was pretty interesting, and yeah, quite an experience. So I had a full house.
That's great. Yeah. Um, I have to say, it sounds like there's like some interesting speak. Like it was interesting, it was
Yeah. Well, I mean it that way. I mean it that way. It was interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think, yeah, yeah, all kinds of stuff going on. But it was fine. It was a pleasant visit. It was perfectly good. But it was, yeah, it was like, oh, all right, that's interesting.
Family, man.
Yeah, exactly. Family dynamics.
Yeah.
Something else.
Yeah, I'm going to be experiencing some of those next week, which, we're going to be off next week as well, because my mom's going to be up here. And so I'll have, my interesting tales to report as well.
Nice. You get along well with your mom?
I do. Yeah, we get along well. We have some pretty strong ideological differences. Things that are pretty fundamental to identity type stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it's great. Like I feel like I can set those things down and we can just be humans together. And yeah, she's very conservative and Christian and whatnot. And I no longer feel like I have to fight that,
Right.
which is like really good, right? Because she's not going to change that. And I don't even want her to, like her Christianity is something that really brings a lot of value and meaning to her life. So I don't
You
like
used to want to change it though, right? That's how
oh,
I
yeah.
feel. Man,
Big
I was
time.
like, I wanted to like my mom's similar, and I just wanted to like break her out. Like you're trapped in a in a prison, and I just want to like rescue you. And then I realized I was like, wait a second, she doesn't want to be rescued. And besides, what am I going to rescue her into, even if it was possible, right? Like, come on, get over yourself. That was just ego talk.
Totally. Yeah.
Everyone's entitled to their trip, including our parents.
For sure. Yeah. And, thinking about it has given me some anxiety, which is our topic for tonight. So appropriate. And I'll have plenty to talk about tonight.
Good. Bring it, Jack. Let's do it. Let's have a little therapy discussion.
Oh, that'd be great. I need some therapy. It's been a tough week, I have to say. A lot has been going on work wise and personal life wise. My car is breaking down, which of course you know that like we're in samsara, everything's impermanent. Stuff breaks, it just does. But then when it does, it's like, damn it.
I hate that.
Couldn't have just waited like 2 more weeks, after my mom's visit? Like that would be so much easier.
No, it's got to break down. Hey, you know what? Better before her visit than during the visit.
That's true. Yeah, because right now we're kind of figuring out what are we gonna do? And fortunately, my roommate has an extra car, so it's like it's totally fine. There's like no big deal.
You got cushion. Cushion.
I got such cushion. Yeah.
Yeah, nice safety net there. All right.
Yeah,
You're not even gonna have to hoof it.
I'm making it up so that you got to worry about me. It turns out you don't have to worry about me. But yeah, I got one of those Priuses, and the check hybrid system light came on, which probably means I got to change the battery, which is gonna be pricey.
Oh, that's like
Yeah, it's a chunk. Yep.
You can't just get some like double A's or something.
No, no, God, that would be great. It's funny because, like, I've spent the last few years kind of being able to accumulate like a small amount of wealth. Like, it's like, this is the first time I've
Mm,
had a good amount of savings and whatnot.
nice, nice.
And it's just so fun, funny to see like how just so quickly like that. Yeah, I gotta spend it. And
Yeah, it's sort of
that's where it goes.
yeah, it's sort of what happens to it, right? It comes, it goes.
It comes, it goes. It's that the wheel of fortune constantly changing.
Mm, I can't
Uh,
stand that part of it. I
I
really can't. I
know.
hate that.
I know. I just want it to keep going up. Yeah. At the wealth, keep
Yeah,
going
but
up.
it really is just like one of those Monopoly games, like where it's like, nope, go, like, oh, mom's about to visit, go straight to jail, do not pass go, do not collect your money.
Yeah, it is. There's just that kind of that edge of cruelty that I can feel when I'm, yeah, on this kind of this samsaric board game, right?
That's right. That's right.
um, and yeah,
Some would say that that's a feature, not a flaw.
wait, can
I'm
you
just
say
saying
more
that
about
the
that?
hardcore capitalists would be like, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, that's totally intentional in the system, right? Like that
yeah.
keep certain classes down, just make sure it's always zapping something out of their pocket. If they start to get up a little too much, take that back down.
It's true. It's totally true. Damn it.
Let's rage against the system.
I, I've been there, and I continue to do that. And there's ways that it makes me tired.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's a Sisyphean task.
It really, yeah, keep rolling that ball up the hill,
Yeah,
watching it. It's not quite a ball, is it? It's a boulder, and then
yeah,
watching it fall back down. Um, I know we're kind of tangenting here, but it's kind of fun.
yeah.
The Myth of Sisyphus. Have you read that by Albert Camus?
I have.
I'd like to get back into that because it's all about how like suicide is not an option, right?
It's
Um,
the ultimate philosophical question.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right.
like why do we keep doing this?
Why do I
What
don't yeah.
why like what's the point? And apparently Camus also like considered suicide and was really thinking about it. And of course he's a philosopher, and so he brings that mind to that consideration. And it's really brilliant. I recommend to anyone who's depressed or contemplating what is this all about. I think it's a really interesting study.
Yeah, well, it all there it might provoke a little bit of existential anxiety,
Yes.
but at the same time, I think that the answer to the question is something that's quite profound,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yes.
why do we keep doing this? I think it's deeply personal,
Hmm.
right? And it's sort of when we ask ourselves that question, I think the answer is illuminating.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the Dharma says so much about why, yeah, why keep going. And uh turns out, so much of the answer for me is that it's not just about me. Like it's not just this isolated
Right.
unit of ego here that I have to take care of. It's like we're all in this together.
That's
Uh
the dramatic change, I think. I think when you are isolated and you are locked into yourself and it's just you and this absurd condition that we find ourselves in, as the existentialists would say, I think it is actually tempting to just say, screw it. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is stupid, right? It's meaningless. It's pointless. There's no reason to keep going. And so I think that that's sort of almost like it's a logical sort of, it's kind of a hardcore logical response to the situation when we're trapped, when
yeah,
we're locked in ourselves that way. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, I think, when we get into the anxiety discussion.
I think
But
so too. Yeah.
before we do, how have you been? What's going on? How's your practice?
Yeah, how is my practice? It's interesting. I find that my shamatha practice, my single pointed focusing on the breath or image or whatnot, I've come to a place like a little bit of an understanding with where I'm at. You know, and it's kind of, I've been working with that for the last few months of just like, okay, yeah, this is my mind right now. This is the state of my mind. And so I'm going to just keep coming back to the practice. And almost like I think when I have a sense of humor about it, it makes it a lot easier, right? So not taking it so incredibly seriously, while of course knowing that, yeah, it's serious. I'm trying to transform my mind. Like that's it's incredibly serious, but the mind is a humorous place. And so and absurd. And so if I can have some lightness, that really helps. But things that are interesting right now are these kind of like everyday little moments that I notice the Dharma kind of, you know, entering, or where I can illuminate this maybe habit of my life that is like, oh gosh, I'm still doing that, you know. So moments like for example, you know, we talked a few weeks ago about peer pressure, and I told you I was going to give you an update, so maybe I can give you a little update. You know, I noticed that this is still very much part of my life, that I have you know, this peer pressure to engage in kind of like gossip, or, you know, bad mouthing people, particularly like management at work, because, you know, I'm doing this organizing work with my fellow coworkers. And so that tends to that's like kind of a habitual thing that people do, is just find ways to shit talk people that are in management. And so since that conversation we had, I really started just being aware of like, okay, when is this happening? And it was interesting just to allow myself to not be perfect, right? To just see like, okay, right now I'm entering that type of a conversation. Okay, what does it feel like? You know, how does the other person's energy feel? How does my energy shift, you know, when I start talking this way? And how does bringing awareness to it, you know, shift that energy and how I respond? And I can't say that I was like, you know, 100% like do-gooder, you know, but
Good. I wouldn't. It would be weird.
it would be weird, right? It would be super weird. So, but I did notice that I just kind of listened a lot more. I just kind of listened and really tried to work on my, you know, the skills that I use in counseling, which is kind of like reflecting to the person like, huh, this is how this is making you feel. And, you know, trying not to get wrapped up in my own stuff, or be reactive, you know. So I think it's been very fruitful, and I like that. I like seeing the real life application of Dharma. And it is interesting too to see how my perfectionism is lessening a little bit, you know, because I think there was a time in my life where I would have been really mad at myself for noticing like, oh, you're doing the thing again.
Oh, you know? Right. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so I'm not doing that, which is great. I think, why add that extra layer of suffering on top of it?
Would you say that when you notice it, this is just what I might be projecting here, but when you notice it, like that, what you notice is sort of like a constriction or a collapse, and when you sit back and sort of just like listen and watch it, like once you've already passed the sort of basic awareness stage, that it opens up and becomes a little bit more flowy, spacious.
It becomes less about me in a way.
Yeah.
You know, it's more just kind of like, okay, I'm here to listen.
Yeah.
And so yeah, in that way I think it does end up being a little more spacious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
interesting.
I'm proud of you, Jac.
Thanks. I know, working on it.
You're doing it. You're doing it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome.
What's going on in your world, other than the, you know, the visit and whatnot? How did it impact your training?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Not as much as I thought. I still was able to get a decent amount of meditation done, like when they'd take day trips or whatever. Anyway, it was I've been my meditation practice has been working with just sort of noticing resistance, both to practice, which is not super great. Like the resistance isn't super great. Like it's pretty easy for me to get to my cushion. But within the practice, like I noted, like I've been working a lot more using some instructions from Lama, to try to be, to work on my sort of my lethargy or my flightiness or whatever you want to call it. And a little bit like what you said, a little bit more sort of just gentleness where I'm like, oh, right, there it is. That's what your mind's doing. Okay, like, let's not do that anymore. Let's come back, right? And so in that sense, it's really good. It's been super helpful. Part of the reason why I was looking forward to our discussions this week and next week around, or not the week after, around anxiety, is that I actually, for the last few weeks, have experienced an uptick in anxiety. And so it's been sort of at the forefront of my mind. And it's been really interesting to watch it. I noticed a few different things about it. Like I notice it's somewhat cyclical, right? Like there's like some kind of a rhythm to anxiety and depression in my life. But also I was thinking that I had sort of described it as like free floating anxiety without really knowing a cause. And when I brought it to the cushion and just sort of watched what was going on, I was able to sort of discover some of the triggers and some of what I think are like the contributing factors. And so really helpful in that regard. Instead of getting locked in to it, right, it was more just like observing it. And there was something there to work with. It wasn't just this like, oh, this is happening and I don't know why it's happening and it's just here and I have to deal with it. Instead, it was this like that's how I was feeling about it. But then I'd sit with it and I would notice like, right, these are some contributing factors. And so I'm happy to report that like instead of really slipping into sort of a long cycle, I get the sense that it's already sort of wearing off, right? I feel lighter already, feel better, but at the same time, it was really great because in the past, when I've gotten to sort of these episodic cycles of sort of anxiety and depression, I've noticed like not just that I get stuck there, but like it becomes really like everything, right? Yeah. Like it just impacts everything that I'm doing, and it makes me a lot less, not just less present, but less capable, right? Less energetic. It makes me talk about lethargy, not just in meditation, but it just like wipes me out. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's been really helpful. My meditation practice has been good. And I was listening to a talk that Lama gave recently. I didn't get to attend in person, but I listened to it on YouTube. And as is oftentimes the case, some of the best information came out during the questions and answers. And one of the Sangha members had asked him, he was talking about all these plans and this vision for Lions Road Dharma Center. And another Sangha member said, well, what about everybody getting overwhelmed? What, like with everything that's going to be done, there's all kinds of activity and stuff, do you have any concerns about people being overwhelmed? And I thought his response was really quite beautiful. And I actually learned quite a lot from it. And what it just showed me is like his skill as a teacher. Like it was fantastic. But one aspect of it that I think we already sort of know, but that I thought like really rung true and was helpful to me was this notion that like if you're feeling really overwhelmed, there's a good chance that you're not really putting your practice first. And I think it's interesting. And what he said is something I don't want to like put words in his mouth, but it was something to the effect of, you're not putting your practice above all other things in your life, right? And I noticed that with myself, like it's not that I am actually doing it on a regular basis, but I don't sense the same kind of like, I don't give it this sort of like importance, you know? And so I like, it's there, I'm doing it, right? Just like I brush my teeth or something, but I don't brush my teeth with importance. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's sort of like it's a thing I'm doing, but it's not like the thing I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I've been wanting to sort of like kick it up a notch in terms of my application to it, my like actually applying myself to my practice and like really putting it first.
That's really interesting. I'm so glad you brought that up. That idea that when we're really bringing our life to the Dharma, then that transforms everything rather than thinking like, oh, I need to bring the Dharma to my life so that, I can enhance it and
Right.
things can be easier and, whatever kind of spiritual materialistic ideas we have around Dharma and spiritual
Yeah.
practice and whatnot, which is like, that's, I think, just at least I know for myself and for probably a lot of Westerners or anyone, and really anyone, is that we're thinking about ways to make our life better, and Dharma does do that. But yeah, when we're really thinking about, okay, bringing my life to the Dharma and having that be the central kind of orientation of my life, it really, you're right, it really changes everything. And maybe that's part of the reason why I've been experiencing such anxiety lately myself, is that, in a similar vein, like, and not every day, but, there will be days where I'm just kind of lackluster about my meditation, which I think is probably just, cyclical and whatnot. Um, or like, it'll feel like I'm kind of just fitting it in to everything
Yep.
else,
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah. What you just said.
Yeah, where
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna squeeze in this meditation here in between, like, getting ready, and in between, like, going to this next thing. I'm like, okay, I can squeeze it in here.
Uh-huh.
But that just means that it's gonna be so tense, right? Because it's like thinking about like all the other things that I've just did or have to do. And so that is a really profound perspective shift. Is like, okay, maybe there's things that I need to drop a little bit, or um yeah, it is so important. And one thing that I noticed too is that if I'm bringing things from my life into meditation, it's going to be much more fruitful than just kind of like, going through the prayers, and just kind of reciting them rather than really thinking about my life. And one example of that this last weekend was that uh, I I got up from I was doing a workout outside, and I picked up the mats to put them away, and there was this moth that somehow had gotten underneath the mat. And there's this big, beautiful moth. Um, and my heart just like dropped. I was so sad that this moth had gotten crushed and it was still alive. Uh,
Oh.
and I was just, really sitting with their suffering and saying prayers for them. And later on, I did a Vajrasattva practice to kind of purify, like that I killed this moth, and to also, like send them hopefully good karma or whatever. And I really felt so deeply um, connected with what I was doing, because it was really, it applied to what happened,
Yeah.
And so I think that's really what we need to be doing is reflecting on what's happening in our lives,
That's right.
and then thinking about these different things, like our precepts, or yeah, what does it mean to live a good life in terms of Dharma practice, and how do we care for others? And it's these very fundamental things that are showing up in our life all the time. All of it's Dharma, right? And we just need to think of it
Absolutely.
that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I accidentally actually killed a black widow. Uh, since,
Yeah.
since the last week, or yeah, it was like a few days ago. And it was very similar where I was like, I truly did not intend to kill this spider. And I was washing off my garbage can, like trying, like there were all these webs and stuff. and she was tending to her eggs. She
Yeah.
had her little egg sac, so she was a mom, and she was going to be a mom to multiple beings, all this, right? And I really was just like hosing off, and I've in my experience, I thought black widows were like completely indestructible, almost tick-like, right? Like like that's in the past. I'm like, yeah, there's nothing gonna like whatever. Anyway, she died because me hosing her off. And it was similar. I did, said some prayers for her, and just like really, like I was like, no, no, no. I'm trying to like
Yeah.
help her out. I'm like, no, please don't die, And then, but the end result was like you said, it's quite profound, right? Like it's not. I'm not like trying to like whatever. I've killed some insects or something. I'm not trying to make it bad. I'm just saying like
Yeah.
every facet of our life is applicable, right? Definitely, we can bring it to the Dharma. So
Yeah.
anyway. You
Absolutely.
could go on a tangent there, but I
Yeah.
still feel bad about that Black Widow. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
I
oh.
know. I know. Um, but yeah, that I mean it's just another sign of how intimately connected we are with every other being. It's special. Well, my friend, should we check out some Lojong?
Let's do it. Let me share my screen.
All right.
All right. I was thinking, so it's the random Lojong slogan generator on lionsroardharmacenter.org. And I thought, to make it extra random, I'm going to shake the page. So there we go. Okay. So I shook the page, just like, does that help? You think?
It
Maybe?
help. I think it's helping. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
It's
Okay.
gonna be
All right.
extra random.
Here we go. See what happens.
All right. Okay. Number 45, acquire the 3 root causes. And it says here, according to Tralag Kyabyon, in the practice of Lojong, cultivating compassion through training the mind, the 3 causes are 1, the spiritual friend, 2, the spiritual instructions, and 3, a supportive environment. And Daniel, I think we've gotten this one at least one other time.
We talked about it extensively. I think shaking the page didn't really help.
Well, maybe shaking the page just is really reaffirming for us that, this is it's critical. We can't do Dharma without these three things, teachers, the Dharma instructions, the teachings, and then the community to support our training. We can try. We can certainly try. I think we've both tried, right? We both tried to do it on our own. We've both
Yeah,
been
I mean, if I
cowboys.
could do it on my own, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
This could very well be the answer to Camus' question, right? This would be a perfectly lovely answer, to the question that we were talking about at the outset. What are we doing? What are we up to? If we haven't yet acquired the 3 root causes, it would be a good idea to maybe see what we can do to change that. Because it is life transforming to discover the spiritual friend and the instructions and the environment. It's also, oftentimes when we get down on ourselves and we get down on life and thinking that it all sucks and it's not worth it and I wish I wasn't here and all of that kind of thing, I think this is where we start to think about the preciousness of our human life, right? Is that if in fact we have these 3 root causes, then our life is incredibly precious.
Yeah.
And it's good to reflect on that, right?
It's super important. Yeah, because otherwise things can just get a little bit stale, right? We go back into the pattern of everyday life and don't really reflect on just how just how lucky. Honestly, I really do feel lucky. I mean, I know that in past lives I've, created karma to be here. So but that's another thing too, is like not wasting that good karma that we've accumulated over countless lives.
Exactly. And this might
Yeah.
be repetitious based on our last time talking about it, but one thing that I remember, I'm pretty sure that I mentioned that I feel like it came up again is that it's not really like passive. It's not a one and done, right? You don't just like, all right, checklist. Number
Right.
one, I got the spiritual friend. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Instructions done, and supportive environment. I'm
All
good.
right.
I call it a day, right? Like it's actually maintaining the relationship with that friend,
Yeah.
right? And really applying the spiritual instructions as we've been talking about, bringing our life to the dharma, right? And also being an active participant in that supportive environment. So just like we are supported by the Sangha, it's really important to be a supportive member of the Sangha, right? So that we're
Yeah.
supporting other people as well.
Most definitely. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a talk on depression at the end of July. And oh yeah, I love this. This, for folks who are just listening, we're looking at an image of Manjushri with his Shakti. It's a statue and it's fabulous. It's quite erotic, and there's a lot of weapons, and yeah, it's intense.
I was gonna say that's hot. That's hot.
Yeah,
You don't normally see Manjushri with his Shakti.
that's right. Yeah, very cool.
That is really neat. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing there.
But one thing I was going to say is I'm going to be doing a talk on
Oh,
depression at the end of July, and one of the I'm kind of just journaling about it right now. You know, I haven't totally come up with the talk, but um, I'm landing frequently on this idea that, you know, Sangha is this incredible antidote to depression, especially when we realize just that preciousness of our interdependence together. That, you know, because depression feels like such a stuck place. But if I'm really believing like in the law of karma and dependent arising, then man, all of us are, you know, working ourselves towards Buddhahood together. And so there's like no need for me to be depressed. Because even, you know, if in this life it's still kind of like hard for me to rouse, you know, like good spirits or whatever, you know, I'm still on this journey with my loved ones, you know, towards Buddhahood. And we're helping each other create the causes together, which is really amazing.
I like that you brought that up. It actually ties right into something that I was hoping to talk about relative to anxiety. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, it's interesting. So this is based upon, this is something that I heard in a talk by Tara Brach that she gave a few years ago about anxiety. A quick little side trip though. I was listening, so I had read some about this particular talk, and I think I'd listened to it before. But then today I was at the gym and I was working out, right? Or I was on the treadmill, that's what it was. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna just listen to it, you know, see, oh, there's nice. And so I was listening to this particular talk, and at one point she says, okay, you know what? Let's just do a quick little check-in. Let's close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. And I was like, okay, yeah. I closed my eyes, and I'm like, oh, I was like, this is so nice. I'm walking and breathing. I was just like, oh. And then all of a sudden I was like, what? I almost went off. I was slower than the treadmill, and my eyes were closed. I wasn't holding on to anything. I almost came off of that thing. It was
Oh my
great.
gosh.
But anyway, sorry, I digress.
Multitasking is dangerous.
But something that I wrote down from the talk that I love that ties into what you were just saying about us sort of walking each other towards Buddhahood here together is about the importance of the intention to bring presence to our difficulties. So whether you're talking about depression or anxiety or something else that's going on, a difficult situation, the idea here is that we're bringing presence to it, and that we're going to, you know, let that difficulty, that it's not a bad thing, right? Because the depression, the anxiety, whatever it is that shows up, that difficulty, we're going to let it wake up our compassion, wake up our active sort of loving kindness, right? And she says that is within Buddhism described as the bodhisattva aspiration, right? So that is the aspiration, right? That of course there's going to be difficulties. Of course we're going to get anxious. Of course we're going to get depressed. What are we going to do with it though, right? Are we going to use that, you know, as a source of an energy that's, you know, transformative, or are we going to get knocked down by it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to let it wake us up. And we are going to be talking about antidotes to anxiety in a couple weeks. So I imagine we're going to dig into that idea a little bit more. But yeah, this week we wanted to talk a little bit about like what is anxiety, and what are some of the causes, from a dharma perspective, or even a secular perspective. What's happening when we're experiencing anxiety. So let's dig in. Yeah.
Yeah. How would you define anxiety, Jac?
Anxiety in my experience is when I'm trying to figure out how I can get what I think I need, basically. And it's projecting into the future.
Yeah.
How can I get the security I need? How can I get, the food I think I need, or, the relationship or whatever? It's a lot of it for me is around acquiring or worrying that I'm going to lose something. Right. So
Yeah.
today, like a lot of my anxiety has been around like, oh, my car, like I got to replace my car, the Prius battery, and I'm going to lose some wealth there. Right. and and so and I think also the unknown, right? The anxiety for me is so much around like, well, I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And so how can I feel okay if I don't have control in this situation? And I wonder if like if that's related to kind of like the lizard brain, right? That's kind of like um pre-ancient ancestor type brain where we're trying
That's right.
to run away from the saber-toothed tiger.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly that's exactly what Tara Brach is talking about in her
Yeah,
talk around this is the limbic system, and
yeah.
she calls that regardless of how it presents itself, what's happening is that she calls it being caught in a limbic trance.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
her whole like everything, her whole shtick is how do you wake up from this trance, right? Like how do you get out of it? And her point is, she's like, look, this fight, flight, or freeze reaction to stressors is it's our human biology, right?
Yeah,
Like it's even prior to being human, right? If you're
right,
looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, it's what we call the lizard brain, right? The
right.
reptilian brain. It's the limbic system, the oldest system. It's
It's
way back in there, right? Like this shit is hardwired,
yeah,
and we all do it, but the way that it manifests is different. And there's a way that it's helpful. Obviously, there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing you. It's a good
you want to
idea
run.
to run. That's, nothing wrong with that. Um, but,
I'd be worried about you if you didn't have the anxiety in that moment.
exactly. But beyond that, when we get trapped in this and we stay sort of in these neurotic trances, so to speak, that's not helpful. Right?
It's
It's not helpful
not.
in so many different ways. At the very least, if you think about it, like that, what the stress hormone cortisol is being produced on a regular basis. That's what gives rise to the response in the first place. And if you have that stress hormone going on all the time, it's bad
Oh my
news. It
gosh.
wreaks
Yeah,
havoc on your system,
you're
right?
right. Yeah, it leads
Yeah.
to so many different problems, and even cancer,
Oh yeah,
high blood pressure, all these.
autoimmune disease is a big one.
Yeah,
That's on the
yeah,
rise, just like, it's huge, right? Like it really affects our systems.
it does. Yeah. How
And
about you,
not to
Karen?
mention the
Yeah,
physic.
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, it, I was going to say, when you were defining anxiety, it's one of those things where I might not be all that capable of defining it, but I do know what it feels like,
Sure.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an incredibly physical experience,
It is. Yeah,
right?
I notice it. There's like
Mm.
definitely in my
Oh,
chest.
yeah.
I sometimes I'll even notice like this kind of tingling, I get this really like almost dense feeling in my my forehead where there's just this tension, right? And so anxiety is so much about tightness, like tensing ourselves to, to be able to react, right? In a life-threatening situation.
Exactly.
But so many of our
Pucker up,
problems
kind of,
right,
like,
yeah,
tighten.
right. But of course, the vast majority of the things that we get anxious about are not going to be life-threatening. And even if they're, threatening in other sense, like, maybe a divorce, of course, something like this big life changer, right? That's going to cause a lot of anxiety. But we're not going to die, right? And so there's anxiety is this kind of like, overreaction.
It really is.
And this really intense exaggeration, right, of the situation.
Yep.
And so if we can kind of pull back, and I think so much of Dharma practice is about pulling back and saying, let me get a realistic view of what's actually happening here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me too, I with that whole trying to figure out like how to get my needs met, and constantly thinking like, because that really, like, so much of my meditation I've noticed is about moving on to the next thing. And so I can make sure that I can get that thing done and get that thing done and check it off the list. And it's like, oh my gosh, my mind is just compulsive when it comes to that. And the idea, I think when I look at it, it's like the idea behind that is that, well, I want Jac to be satisfied, right? I want Jac to have the things so that they can be satisfied and so they don't have to worry, right? But all of that thinking and planning and strategizing is creating the worry and the anxiety and the stress, right? So it's doing the opposite
Right.
of what I'm wanting it to do. It's so absurd.
Man, I was just thinking, I do not suffer from that in the same way. I was actually thinking, man, I could use a touch of that.
Well, that's an interesting point, is that maybe in all of these things we're trying to find like our healthy middle way.
Of course, we're looking for balance, of course.
Yeah.
So on my end, a lot of times, like as you alluded to, uncertainty, right, is a big stressor. And on my end, a lot of the uncertainty comes around like not planning, like it's sort of intentional, right? I just want to see what's going to happen. I don't need a plan. I don't need anything. No. But it turns out like that I would have less uncertainty. I would have less stress, less anxiety if I had a little bit of your planning and like getting shit done sort of mentality.
Yeah.
So if there was a way, can you just like beam some of that over my way? Like,
well, I think maybe what we need is to mind meld, and then
yes,
I could get a little bit of your like chill
right.
out vibe. Like, don't stress over every single detail. We need
Ooh.
to mix it up.
Hey, one of these days we should do on the show, before the show, we should do our Buddha family test, or whatever you call it, where you see what your Buddha family makeup is. I'm curious about yours. I'm interested.
Yeah. So, well, is this something that you can do online? Is this like a thing?
It is.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, our friend Matthew Cruz said it was funny because it's come up in conversation with Lama and a few other situations where there's this like, oh yeah, like these, like the Buddha families are a good way to sort of like discuss your personality, and like how you sort of are naturally and what your natural strengths and weaknesses are. It feels a little bit like horoscopy stuff, like it's not based upon a horoscope, but it's similar in that vein, right? And so anyway, he had sent me a link to an online test to determine your Buddha family. And I'm not going to give it away, but I did have it was like one of those horoscope things where when I read it, I was like, yeah, like, oh my God, that's so true.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I've thought maybe for a while that mine might be Ratnasambhava, which I think is the one for pride.
It's interesting. I see, this is why I think maybe we should have a whole show on it, because given the way that things, like, we oftentimes are on sort of different ends of the spectrum of things, right? You know, like I Ratna was like that was the smallest part of mine.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
so funny. Okay, yeah, this is gonna be, yeah, interesting.
I'll send you the link, and one of these days we'll do a show on it.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah. Um,
Where
yeah,
were we?
funny. Well, a big part of anxiety, and touching on, what I was sharing with how it really ends up doing the opposite, right? My kind of like obsessive mind, I'm trying to get all the things done because I think that's going to help me feel more relaxed. Like it's like, oh, now I have all the things done, right? Um, in that similar way, thinking it all the time about how to get to a moment that feels good and relaxed and where I can chill is constantly pulling me out
Mm.
of this current moment where I could be engaged with what I'm doing. Um, and I really I look at my teacher, and other teachers. They're not just going through life easy, right? Like their lives are not easy. Their lives are hard.
It sure doesn't seem like it.
They're dealing with complex problems and people and systems, right? Because they're, like Lama has created this temple and he's got this community of people that he's advising and helping administrate. That is hard, right? But never have I been in Lama's presence and felt like he wasn't, engaging with the moment. And I feel so at peace, when I'm in his presence.
Yeah.
Um, and so I know that it's possible that regardless of what's happening in the moment or what has to happen down the road, that it is possible to just be here and experience whatever it is that's happening. But it sounds wildly far off for me. Maybe that's just my I don't know, a bias that I have about myself right now. But I know that it's in reach. I know that it's possible. And maybe I've even experienced that being, in the moment under pressure. It just hasn't felt that way recently, to
Well,
be
different kinds of pressures. I mean, at the outset of this show, there was you were talking about the pressure about peer pressure, right?
yeah.
And about how, you're changing that, right? And responding to it differently. I think that it's just that continued application. Eventually we'll get there. I don't think it's that necessarily that far out of reach.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think
Maybe
so.
not.
I think one day, I think it's one of those things where, like, we'll look back on it at some point and be like, wow, right. I used to not be like this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. It's right around the corner. Just
It
right
is
up
right
that
around.
hill. Just one more hill.
Yeah, totally. Oh man, when has anxiety been bad in your life? Has there been times where it's been a lot worse? And
Oh
like
my God.
what
My
was
my
happening?
life has been defined by anxiety. I have, until I met the Dharma, I would say anxiety was my primary condition.
Your state.
It was my
Mm,
state. It was who I was, and it was the main thing that sort of like drove me bananas. Whatever, it was terrible. And so that's why it's really familiar when it comes up. I'm like, oh yeah, whoa, right.
yeah,
Like this is how I used to feel all the time, and it would like I had really poor reactions to it, and very, very, very poor coping mechanisms that just
yeah.
made it worse.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
and so all of it, like I tried to avoid it, I tried to fight it, it just nothing really worked, other than bringing some presence to it. But we'll talk about that part of it, I think, next time. I think that as far as the causes, for me, it's interesting that there are, of course, personal, like you were mentioning in your case, like there's oftentimes cases where it's personal, like where, for example, one of the things that in the past affected me a lot was making poor decisions and then waiting for the fallout. It would
mm,
cause me a lot of anxiety. Like I would do something, whatever, I don't know what, it doesn't even matter what it was, but it was a bad thing. you
Yeah.
know, and then like a little bit later, I'd be like, right, I'm waiting for the outcome of that. Like it's gonna happen. Somebody's gonna whatever. I lied or I did something, and now I'm gonna have to like deal with the consequences of that. And so there was stuff like that, dealing with procrastination and the effects of it, that kind of thing on a personal level. Um, but it's interesting that a lot of the anxiety that I experience now, it was then too, but more so, I'd say like what I notice now is more sort of the social stuff, the bigger picture stuff. That like, um, I know we've always been, I mean, it's a kind of a joke, right? Like we've always been in some kind of a state of transition, right? It's
Yeah.
always been something big happening, like there's something going on and things are speeding up and it's all
Like in
out of
the
control
world.
in the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, like and it's always kind of been that way, but that feeling is pretty pronounced for me
Yeah.
where when I really start, like I know that's what I noticed when I was sitting in my meditation is that I'd been consuming a lot of news and in particular, I'll tell you my story here. A lot of the news that I was paying attention to had to do with artificial intelligence, right? Like it's
Mhm.
all the rage, right? Everybody's talking about it, and it's in news. So I read a lot of news. I subscribed to groups that were talking about it extensively, and I'm using the technology as well, right? So I'm like thinking about it, using it, reading news about it, and everything, right? And so of course it gets this huge. It's like blocking my vision. That's all I can see is this
Yeah.
new technology, right? And on the one hand, I'm excited about it, and I think it's really neat, and it's so transformative. But then I'm like on the other side, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be awful. This is gonna ruin everything, right? Like, like I don't know, like it's gonna hurt a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? And there's even this sort of sense. One of the things that I worry about on a person, like one of the biggest causes of anxiety for me, have to do with money and work, right? Having enough resources, and I'm sure that's just pretty common. Um, but in thinking about this shift in technology, I'm like, oh my God, this thing is going to make me, my business, everybody who works for me completely obsolete, right? Maybe
Yeah.
not right away, but it's just a matter of time. It's going to make my kid's mom, her job will be obsolete before you know it, right?
And you're
Then
just like
yeah,
snowballing
oh
and
my
you're
gosh,
just
right?
like
And then
going.
right. And so then I was like, oh, but you know what? That's not here now. That's actually not what's happening.
Yeah.
And I've never been really good at predicting the future, you know? Uh, I
Maybe,
no, no,
maybe not many of us are.
maybe not, but me in particular, I've never been very good at it, right? But I have been really good at um predicting, like I'm sort of a chicken little sort of a sky is falling person,
Yeah.
right? So,
Mhm.
when I start to really think about things, it tends to get pretty dark pretty quickly,
Yeah.
like I'm not my future tends to not my imaginary future tends not to be a utopia.
Oh, it's post-apocalyptic,
It's
just
so
like
dystopian.
Mad
It's
Max.
terrible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like RoboCop on
Oh yeah.
steroids or something. It's bad news. So of course that makes me anxious, but it's not here now. In fact, there's beautiful animals and nice weather and gorgeous people, and I haven't my like I live in the land of abundance, right? And
Yeah.
like my needs are totally met, and I can't imagine even if I'm like a lot worse off, there's no saber-toothed tiger out there, right?
Yeah, there's not.
There's
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So like really, in this case, the action that I took was to just cut the news.
Yeah.
So I just was like, that's exacerbating the problem, and I don't need that. It's okay. I can just like carry on with my life. We
Yeah.
had a whole show about news, right? And
Oh yeah. Yeah.
this
No,
this is
it's
this is a part of it. Like sometimes it's too much,
right.
right?
Yeah, it can definitely be a big source of my anxiety as well. And I'm looking forward to talking about some of the antidotes to that, because I do think that when I can shift my perspective and really believe, because I think that's a problem for me, is that when I get in this anxiety state, I lose some of my faith, right, in Dharma
Yes.
principles. And
Yes.
I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, it's just, no, it's all effed. People are effed, like we're destroying the planet. And like, yeah, it's true. We are destroying the planet. But do I believe that there's something that can be done about it? That's really important, to have some faith that actually things are possible. People can change. We can change. Like that's the whole. I feel like that's one of the foundational things, right, about Dharma. We learn that the true nature of one of the natures of things is that they change. So I believe that things can change in a direction that is, more humanistic or earth-centric, or all the things that I'd like to see. I have to believe that that's possible. Otherwise, I get into that despair of like, well, then we're all just effed.
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up. I feel exactly the same way. When I get locked into one of these limbic trances, so to speak, or whatever, I'm in the state of anxiety. Not only do I get sort of isolated and kind of small and whatever, reactionary and angry and whatever, but I lose faith, right? And it's weird to me because I'm like, I can see it happen. I'm like, yeah, no, it's all. There's this like reverting back to this. Everything is sort of bad. Sort of viewpoint, and that just isn't the situation, right? It's not that everything is great, it's not that
Right.
either, but that's the thing, right, about impermanence. On the one hand, it seems to be something that when we have a mistaken viewpoint of it, then it causes us some grief,
And a lot of anxiety,
a
right?
lot of anxiety. But on the flip side, it's also the saving grace. It's also the thing that's going to sort of like get us out of it.
Yeah, totally. When we have that realistic view of how things are, then it's like kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then it settles it down a little bit. Yeah. Well, we're going to be talking a lot more in a couple weeks about those things, those antidotes to anxiety, and I'm really looking forward to that. But even just talking about anxiety in general tonight, I feel has been really helpful for me, and where I'm at in my experience with anxiety. So thank you, Daniel, so much.
Well, and I'm not wishing, hang on, I'm not wishing any more anxiety for either one of us. But
Yeah.
should it come up in the next 2 weeks, we'll view it as like, okay, no, this is for the show, right? This is for the show. And then we'll try to apply whatever, we know about, dealing with anxiety and transforming it and using it as on our path to wake up, right?
Yep.
We'll apply that and then we'll get to talk about it at the next show.
Sounds beautiful. Yeah, and for those listening too, if you experience anxiety in the next couple weeks, at the very least, just remind yourself it's impermanent.
It's impermanent.
It's impermanent.
This too shall pass.
This too shall pass. It always works.
Yeah.
Eventually.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
Well, thank you, Daniel, so much. I appreciate you. And thanks to everyone for listening. Really look forward to talking with you again in 2 weeks.
Same. Have a great time with your mom.
Thank you. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.